In the Golden Crow Galaxy, the Blood Emperor's base was attacked by a fleet of awakened ships from the Lan-Hai Alliance of Nations. However, the Bloody Emperor himself was not on the front line. The entire elite squad of the Empire was destroyed by the Alliance troops. Meanwhile, the Blood Emperor himself was fighting an unknown enemy. He was able to defeat him in just 36 minutes, but did not give his name and only joked that he was just passing by. But for someone just passing by, he was too strong, because not everyone is capable of defeating the Bloody Emperor. The guy said that at first, it was difficult for him to destroy him too, but after 78 times, he hadn't used even a tenth of his strength. The Bloody Emperor didn't even understand what he was talking about. The guy continued to joke and say that the Bloody Emperor had a very old-fashioned name and that he didn't like it at all. Feeling a little sad, the Bloody Emperor said that he had buried him in time, and now he was in the past. The guy still wouldn't let up and started coming up with a new name for him, suggesting he call himself Bloody Gravy. After all, he was bored with letting the Emperor simply pass away, and he unlocked the breath of life, the object of which was the Bloody Emperor. The Bloody Emperor realized with bewilderment that this was the breath of life of the Temple of the Starry Sky, and his regeneration began. The guy used a sacred artifact capable of saving him at a critical moment, but it was useless to him because his cells were incapable of division. Then he had an idea and suggested to the Blood Emperor that he take revenge on the people of the 7 nations. This proposal greatly surprised the Blood Emperor because he thought that his new acquaintance was one of the 7 nations. In a way, he was right, because the guy really did belong to them before, but he had grown tired of them and had stopped helping them. Looking into the Bloody Emperor's eyes, he saw that he hardly wanted to go to the other world, because he had done so many things. The Bloody Emperor decided that this was how he wanted to turn him into a puppet. But the guy had no interest in that, and didn't engage in such activity. The only thing he really wanted was a new world. The young man remembered with anger that 1,000 years had already passed for him. But what he had spent all this time on did not inspire him with enthusiasm. After all, everything around him was not his world, but a completely different one. And apparently, the guy was just as crazy as the Bloody Emperor. The Bloody Emperor feared a painful death if he did not agree. He agreed to everything the guy said, but he knew that his life no longer belonged to him, and since the bloodthirsty one wanted to destroy the world of stars, he would lead him. And a sword flashed in the guy's hands. Bowing before him, the Bloody Emperor swore to serve his master. Suddenly, the young man heard a sound. It was a notification that the 276th round of closed beta testing had been completed. System diagnostics were complete. Logical errors and database errors were fixed. And that meant the opening of the open beta version of the game. The guy rejoiced wildly, because he had been waiting for this moment for 1,000 years, and thought he would go crazy waiting. A data integrity check for the open beta testing was launched, and it was necessary to wait a little longer. The system diagnostics were completed, and the game was officially opened for public use. The guy looked at the open entrance with impatience and genuine interest. Miss Guide came out to meet him, greeted him, and asked him to introduce himself. The guy did not give his name and introduced himself as Mnimyi. The registration was successful, and Miss Guide asked him to choose his race. The choice was between the human race and the mechanoid race. Minimoy chose human and was about to press the button. But before he could confirm his choice, the guide reminded him that mechanoids had a number of advantages in terms of characteristics, such as strength and physique. In addition, they could receive additional bonuses to experience and speed of leveling up the technical skill tree by connecting the appropriate knowledge module. Now Minimoy was sure of his choice, because he hadn't spent 1,000 years here for nothing. The starting bonuses for mechanoids were very tempting, but by choosing this race, it was impossible to obtain a mythical profession, and it was impossible to use human items, which made the final stages difficult. Now he had to choose between normal or special starting conditions, in which the player would encounter random events and unusual rewards. And Mimi chose a normal start, because over 1,000 years, he had conducted more than 200 experiments, and in 2 out of 3 cases, had received terrible conditions. So one night, under the name Don Haobo, he was a criminal in an interstellar gang of rank C, and was caught. He tried to prove to the police that they had made a mistake, but even the absence of a mustache and beard did not help. And now, the imposter did not want to risk ending up in an interstellar juvenile detention center again. The choice was made, and the login was completed, but there was a glitch caused by the detection of the NPC profile. His analysis was successful, the profile loaded successfully, and the player was welcomed to the Star World. That morning, Minimi woke up at 10:30. He sat up in bed and couldn't understand where he was. The Valkyrie hospital robot greeted him and congratulated him on his recovery. This was very strange because before, he always appeared on the territory of the forest supply base of the planet Manhwa of the Seven Nations. According to his medical records, he had been sent to a special ward for treatment as a casualty of the battle against the Bloody Emperor. The Valkyrie Hospital was a network of hospitals created by the Alliance for those wounded during the battle with the Bloody Emperor, and they were equipped with the latest equipment. After thinking for a moment, Minimoy asked to be left alone and given some rest. The robot doctor asked him to let him know if he needed anything and left the ward. No one but Minimoy could see the profile window, but he had a feeling that the robot was watching and all the characteristics had been reset. Minimoy decided to check the forum and find out if other players of the closed beta version had gone through something similar. On the forum, he was intrigued by the news about the most mischievous player who had achieved the 99th achievement of Miss NPC, and the photo proved it. Without a penny in his pocket, it was difficult to buy anything, and the next photo also proved this. Looking at these photos, Minimoy remembered that even when he was put in solitary confinement, he didn't do anything like that, but the players were still the same. When he saw the date, May 23rd, 2046, he was taken aback because he clearly remembered that he had entered the game on February 22nd of that year. It turned out that he had been in the game for 1,000 years, but in reality, less than 100 days had passed. He posted an announcement in the chat room looking for players participating in the closed beta testing and awakened, promising a reward for information. He waited anxiously for responses from other players. But from all the comments on his post, it became clear that no one knew about him or the closed beta version. But what surprised him most was that none of the players knew about the awakened. The awakened are a symbol of the second revolution, and the only key to the awakening and evolution of humanity. And that was precisely why Nimoy signed up for the closed beta testing. But now it turned out that for some reason, they did not exist, and it was unclear what he had spent 1,000 years on. Minimi realized that he had not actually passed away. He was real, and a very interesting thought occurred to him. What if he was an NPC written by a programmer to test the game, and perhaps he could be reincarnated hundreds of times while retaining his memory? But it was unclear why he had been here for 1,000 years. And could reality really be so deeply imprinted on his consciousness? But as the famous saying goes, the less you know, the better you sleep. It was necessary to reach the very peak of perfection. Then it would be possible to find answers to all the questions of interest. The city of Qingfeng was the only large city in the north of the Tanwu Empire, and Minimoy walked the streets of this city on his very important business. After all, he urgently needed to get to one interesting place. To be more precise, the prestigious intelligence department of the Tianwu Empire, called the Six Dark Dragons. Minimoy had no choice but to take a couple of quests for beginners and start leveling up, and his 1,000 years of experience would come in very handy. It didn't matter what he would encounter, because he had an advantage and couldn't wait to get started. Upon entering the building, Minimoy saw a crowd of people gathered in the reception area, but after pushing through the crowd a little, he went straight to the stairs where the guards were standing. To the surprise of the entire crowd, the guards let him through. But to pass, he needed 2,000 reputation points, and to enter Tianwu, he needed at least 1,000. The guards did not let players who did not meet the conditions pass. Although Minimoy had his reputation reset equals, he had something that other players did not have. His trump card was his NPC profile, and handing the guard a note, Minimoy asked him to pass it on to the director. He was sure that the director would want to meet him. He waited for an invitation in the corridor opposite the director's office. But Minimoy didn't have to wait long, and after a couple of minutes, the guard allowed him to enter the office. The lock on the director's office door clicked, and Minimoy was able to enter. The director was sitting away from the door, in a large, spacious office with huge windows. Without turning to face the guest who had entered, he asked who he was. But Minimoy didn't need to see the director, because he had the ability to scan. The scan showed that he was Kong Ming, director of the Six Dark Dragons, a specialist in intelligence and target tracking. He also learned all her data, from her level to her skills and rank, but she couldn't understand how he knew all this. But Minimoy did not reveal his cards, and because of this, Kong Ming's attitude towards him deteriorated. But he could help her find the remains of her comrade, because due to the agreement between the Dark Dragons and Tianwu, they could not set foot on the Tianwu Mountains. Kong Ming listened angrily to what Minimyu was saying, considering him a complete scoundrel. Lately, there had been many problems with the imperial ministers, and the pretender suggested that she put an end to it. The impostor suggested that Kong Ming find and bring her the bandit lion Falcon and the others. These were the call signs of her comrade, and she had not heard them in so long. After his words, Kong Ming's attitude towards him improved significantly, and he promised to return the remains of her comrades to her. As for himself, he also really wanted to know who he was. His words sounded very strange to Director Kong Ming, but despite this, she still decided to believe Minimoy. Minimoy smiled and thanked her for her gesture, but she immediately made it clear that he had no connection to them, which meant he would receive neither subordinates nor money. However, he had his own issues with the ministry, and he promised to help resolve them, which caused a storm of emotions in her. She urged him to reconsider. Minimoy decided that she was worried about it, but Kong Min tried with all her might to show that this was not the case. Chuckling, he headed for the door so as not to tease her anymore, and reminded her not to forget to send a spaceship for him. At that moment, Kong Min snorted something under her breath in dissatisfaction, and Enemy realized that she was still the same proud little moon. When he led her out of her office, Kong Min couldn't contain her emotions about how he had spoken to her. But what interested her most was how Nimyi knew her call sign. By the time Nimyi went downstairs, Kong Min's relationship with him had increased by 55 points, and when it reached 100 points, they would move on to the friendship level. A quest called Teammates was launched for Minimoy. It was a hidden exclusive task with a very good reward. As soon as Mimyi was about to press the button to start, someone called out to him. Looking up, he saw 3 guys he didn't know. He didn't know them at all, so he was a little scared. But they apologized for invading his personal space, and said they just wanted to invite him to join their guild. Minimi thought about this offer from strangers, and they began to tell him about themselves and their guild. Their guild was called Cold Moon, a well-known guild throughout Qinfeng, and they had access to hidden C and D level quests. The guild master and his deputy were among the top 30, and the guild's strength was among the top 10. If Nimyi joined, he would become part of the guild's elite. He was very curious to know what had made them so interested in him, and if he told them how he managed to get to the 2nd floor, and his combat power and loyalty were great, he would be promoted. Minimoy listened to all these benefits with a bit of mockery. Others had worked for 3 years to achieve this, but Minimoy could get it right away, and that was very cool. But Minimam found it all very boring and not interesting at all. He replied that he wasn't interested and turned away. The guys tried to persuade him to think about the offer again, but he left, and everyone was shocked that he wasn't interested in such generous terms. But the third one kicked the others to follow Minimoy and not let him get away, while he decided to inform the guildmaster and his deputy. The plains north of the city of Qingfeng looked very peaceful, but on this plain, the Cold Moon Guild had just finished a battle with a bunch of monsters. The guildmaster and deputy watched what was happening, and, while talking to their subordinates, asked them not to lose sight of Minimoy until their arrival. After all, they had worked so hard just to start completing C and D level quests so that they could raise their reputation by 150 points at once. This man had already raised his reputation to 2,000, and he had either taken a hidden B-level quest or knew some loophole, and the guild needed him. They had to recruit Minimogo at all costs. The city sparkled with advertising signs and amazed with its variety of shops. Minimoy decided to go to the adventurer's shop because he already had lockpicks and some of the necessary tools, but that wasn't enough. In the shop window, he chose a bottle of invisibility potion for himself. It was a magical consumable, and after using it, you became invisible for 5 minutes. After paying 1,000 coins, the coveted bottle was in his pocket. But suddenly, a system notification appeared stating that a player named Spirit of the Cold Moon Flower had used a tracking ability on him. The pretender couldn't even guess who was following him. It was the guildmaster of the Cold Moon Guild herself, and she was already rushing towards him from the roof of a skyscraper. Sensing someone's approach, Minimoy prepared for attack and grabbed his sword. He was determined and ready to strike his unknown enemy. But the Spirit of the Cold Moon Flower clung to his leg and, with eyes full of respect and tenderness, asked what she could do for him. She clung to Minimoy's legs with great tenderness. The guildmaster could only see his nickname, and due to his rank and reputation, the rest of the information could not be obtained. But the note indicated that his degree of danger to the city was equal to a natural disaster, and she really hoped that they had not provoked him. Minimogo's favorability towards her decreased by 5 points, and their current relationship level was that of strangers, for which she blamed her subordinate. But suddenly, a system notification arrived with a proposal to assign a task to a player named Spirit of the Cold Moon Flower. And Minimoy remembered that he was now an NPC, and could assign tasks, which was very interesting. He needed to set the conditions for completion and the reward, but there were restrictions on the number of rewards per task, so he set about compiling everything. The task was related to trade, and she needed to purchase a set of irradiated magnetic bombs, and the reward for it was 4,000 experience points. Such a reward delighted her, because the entire guild had to complete hidden tasks with levels C and D to get 3,000 experience points. And this NPC simply gave 4,000 points for a task of this level, so it was worth it. No wonder he was compared to a natural disaster. And the spirit of the cold moon flower accepted this task from Nimogo. But according to the terms, she only had 1 hour to complete this task. She understood everything and quickly set off to complete the task. All the members of the guild came to her aid. They found where the necessary goods were sold, but the seller asked for 600,000 coins for these bombs. The spirit of the cold moon flower was not prepared to pay such a sum. It was a real ripoff, because the player only had 5,000 coins to begin with, but their guild from another country was quite wealthy. At that time, Minamoi had no particular reason to rush, and he waited for his order with a smile. Suddenly, he heard the voice of the Cold Moon Guildmaster behind him, saying that everything had been done. She was ready to hand him a set of bombs, with a high concentration of radioactive elements that detonated under the influence of magnetic waves. This set was suitable for various tasks, and Minamoi happily pressed the accept button. The item was received, and he thanked her for her excellent work, because now he could easily complete the hidden task. Minimoi's favorability toward her increased by 15 points, but their current relationship was still at the stranger level. But Minamoi already liked her very much, even without that. But after these words, his favorability toward her dropped by 5 points. The spirit of the cold moon flower was ready to carry out any task Minamoi gave her. Smiling, he asked if she was really ready for anything. The Cold Moon Guildmaster was indeed ready to do everything in her power. Although she was only at the 6th level, she never admitted defeat. Minimoy realized that it would be quite difficult to get rid of her now. He was going to leave Qingfeng for a couple of days, and if fate brought them together again, he would tell her how to contact him. The spirit of the Cold Moon Flower was incredibly happy to hear such words from him. Thanks to the limitations of the system, Minimi did not have to fear that the player would harm him, and this opened up an unimaginable number of possibilities. The spirit of the Cold Moon Flower decided not to let other guilds know about this NPC. A message appeared on the guild forum, stating that all representatives of the Tianwu Empire must gather in the city of Qingfeng within 30 minutes. The Tian Mountains, which were 5,300 meters high, were home to almost all monsters up to the rank of Lord from levels 10 to 50. Thanks to the odor neutralizer, Mimi could pass through without fighting the mobs. Ordinary players would have lost their companions and died along the way, but Chen Mo, who had participated in beta testing for 1,000 years, was ready for anything. During that time, he had learned to imitate the skills of various professions, relying on his rich experience and control of his body. Mimic was already in place, and it was the shortest route to the goal. There was just a little bit left, and his opponent would reveal himself. Next to the rock on which he stood appeared a level 25 Yamakara python. It was an ordinary giant python inhabiting the Tianwu mountain, famous for its high fertility and incredible tail strength. But Mimni already knew how to deal with this monster. He thrust a sharp harpoon with a rope into the top of a nearby rock. In this way, he flew through the air above the Yamakara python. This is how Mnimi moved from one new point to another. Sometimes it seemed that he was about to fall into the python's mouth with its huge teeth, but he was able to overcome each of them and remain unharmed. Although the python's mouths were only a centimeter away from him, but he managed to get around them all and find himself safe on the plain. Now he could breathe a sigh of relief, even if only for a moment. After all, new monsters were already waiting for him in the neighboring field of Minimogo. They were level 35 one-horned bulls. These herd monsters lived in the Tianwu mountain and would attack any potential threat as a group. Even a level 40 player would have a hard time with them. But why take the risk when there was something else he could use? Minimoy took out a small bottle of invisibility potion. He drank a little of the precious potion straight from the bottle, but the potion tasted disgusting to him. He also had a dexterity potion with him, which increased his dexterity by 15% for 10 seconds after consumption. After all, in order to calmly pass by the herd, he needed to run at full speed. He sped through the herd like a bullet and practically ran away from them. But suddenly, one of the one-horned bulls became suspicious. It loudly sounded the alarm to the rest of the herd. At that moment, it turned out that the invisibility potion had stopped working. Now the entire herd of one-horned bulls was running straight at Minimogo, but he had one trick up his sleeve that would save his life. With the help of a harpoon with a rope, he found himself at the top of a huge tree. The enraged bulls looked up at him, but could not reach him. According to satellite data, Minamoy was on the very cliff from which Kong Min's companions had fallen. He proceeded cautiously to search for them. After walking a little further behind the bushes, he saw 3 skeletons. But their equipment was not like the standard equipment of the 6 dark dragons, and it was not them. Now he had to find out who Imaginary had discovered here. A quest opened up for him where 3 dead men had discovered a tomb and were mysteriously destroyed, and he had to find out the cause of their death. But according to the quest conditions, Minimyi could not interact with the item. Since that was the goal of the task, he couldn't open the diary until the previous checkpoints had been passed. But he didn't have time for that now, so he decided to just bury the dead men. He continued his search because, as far as he remembered, he was very close to his destination. But suddenly, Minimyi stepped on a sword sticking out of the ground. It was quite an interesting find for this area. It looked very similar to a sword belonging to the army of the Tianwu Empire. And then, deep in the river, Nimyi saw a skeleton lying on the bottom. And behind the bushes nearby lay another skeleton. And next to it, huddled at the foot of a high cliff, sat another dead man. It turned out that Mimyi had found the remains of 3 people, and all that was left was to find the last one. Minimyi thought that he might have gotten something wrong, because 1,000 years had passed. Then, memories of the entrance to the cave he was looking for came back to him. A difficult task awaited him, because the last one was in this dungeon. There were so many forks in the road that the potion might not be enough, and Minamoy needed to find the remains before he encountered the monster. Running out onto one of the forks, he realized he had found what he was looking for. A huge, terrifying spider sat on the wall of the dungeon, and beneath it sat a human skeleton. It was a level 36 devil spider. It could sense danger in advance, and was one of the most dangerous monsters in the Tianwu Mountain. If Nimyi were an ordinary player, he could have revived, but now he couldn't take any risks. However, the gap in their strength was too great, and the options that came to mind would not work. Then a solution came to mind, and he drank both the invisibility potion and the agility potion at the same time. Nimyi rushed toward the monster, trying to slip past it, but the devil spider sensed his presence and descended from the wall. Minimoy's plan to quickly slip past failed. The devil spider was able to block all his escape routes. However, there was still a chance, and choosing the right moment, Minimoy slipped under the spider. He was able to quickly attach one of his bombs to the spider's belly. Then he darted out from under the devilish spider. A few moments later, the spider struck the ground with its huge, sharp claws. Minimyi managed to get away from it to a safe distance. He waited for the spider to become enraged and attack him. The spider, its eyes burning, ran at him, wanting to destroy him. A moment later, there was a deafening sound of a bomb explosion. It took the pretender only a few jumps to get around the spider. Now he could reach the coveted exit from the cave. Another interesting object appeared in Minimogo's hand. It was another bomb, which he threw at the spider. It flew straight toward the devil spider's head. A deafening explosion rang out at the very exit of the cave. The shock wave from the explosion was so strong that it was difficult to stay on one's feet. The magnetic bomb was incredibly powerful, of course, but even it was not enough to defeat the spider. The explosion stunned him, followed by dizziness and blindness. Meanwhile, Nimyi approached the skeleton to take it with him. Having successfully completed his task, he returned to the city of Chengfeng. But as he walked down the street, he felt that someone was following him. Those who were following him were hiding around the corner of a building, and he did not have time to see them. Meanwhile, the guys reported to their boss that Minimyi had returned to the city. The guildmaster of Cold Moon asked them to continue following him, but not to provoke him. After all, if he noticed them, they would have to quickly apologize and leave immediately. The members of the Cold Moon Guild understood everything that was required of them. At that moment, Minimyi entered the office of Director Kong Min, and when she saw him, she asked if he had found her comrades. The answer was, of course, yes, because she had given him that task. Kong Ming didn't know what to say in response, and was a little embarrassed. But suddenly, her gaze fell on what he had brought with him. It was what was left of her comrade, Falcon Bandit and Lion. Bowing her head over them, Kong Ming thanked Minimogo. He couldn't even find the right words to say to her in response. But then, taking her by the shoulder, he said that he was very sorry for her loss. Kong Min's favor toward him increased by 10 points. Minimoy successfully completed the hidden task, and the rewards for it were sent to the inventory. He was very pleased, and now it was time to receive these rewards. Stepping aside, he opened the screen and watched as his inventory was updated. One of the items in the inventory interested him the most. It was the legendary Starshine set. According to legend, anyone who wore it would see their life shine with new colors. Seeing it in his inventory, Nimyi was truly amazed. The damage inflicted on the owner of the set below level 15 was reduced tenfold, while the damage to the target was increased tenfold. The damage reduction made Minimoy practically invulnerable, and with such an attack, he could handle anyone. It was an indispensable item for the beginning of the game. In 1,000 years, he had never been lucky enough to see this equipment. Perhaps it was a new feature of this version. Now it remained to see what rewards were left, because Minimoy knew that this was not all. He had access to a genetic potion, because the first step in the profession of a martial arts master is to strengthen the body and increase physical strength. The awakening crystal was the gateway to the world of magic, and now he could use various elements: earth, fire, water, and wind. There were also blueprints for mechanoids. This mechanical heart was a power plant that replaced the heart, and as long as it was intact, the owner was immortal. It was a legendary item, undoubtedly one of the best for a start. But there was also a scroll of mage knowledge. With this scroll, he could become a mage at any moment, but he would have to pay an uncertain price for it. But Minimoy did not need it, because his defense and health would then become almost zero. Next was an unknown potion, and during beta testing, someone with a hidden A-rank profession defeated the final boss alone in 5 moves. It was the first profession that could approach the level of God, and with each sip of this potion, one had to absorb secrets that could drive one mad. And Minimoy chose the potion because none of this was a problem for him. After choosing this potion, he asked Kong Min if there was a place here where he could be alone. At that time, she was mourning the remains of her comrades. After regaining her composure a little, she led the imaginary one to the room he needed. He asked her to make sure that no one disturbed him. Locking the door behind him, he sat down comfortably on the bed. Deciding to start drinking the potion, he quickly took a few sips. To his surprise, the potion turned out to be quite tasty. At first, Minimoy felt no change, and thought that perhaps all the stories about the potion were just myths. But suddenly, some strange changes began to happen to him. An unbearable pain appeared in his chest, and he grabbed his heart with his hand. His body began to rise high into unknown space, and then he began to fall at tremendous speed into a black abyss. Suddenly, he was engulfed in a hot flame, and it was unbearably hot. But after passing this stage, he continued his rapid fall. Now everything was replaced by some kind of ice, and it became unbearably cold. Thus, he entered a new stage as a secret novice, and discovered new branches of skills, and his attributes of strength, agility, and spirit were increased by 100 points. His vessel was transformed into a vessel of spiritual energy, and now, the imaginary one finally woke up and came to his senses. He was still sitting on the same bed, but he realized that his body had changed. He had succeeded, and the transformation had been more than successful. Having finished all his business, Nimyi could calmly leave the room. Meanwhile, Kong Min watched as the remains of her comrades were carried away on stretchers. Hearing footsteps behind her, she turned around and asked Minimi if he had finished his business. Looking at him closely, she asked if everything was all right with him, because he seemed like a different person. Minimoy did not explain anything to her, and replied that everything was fine. Turning silently, he quickly went on with his business. He only threw her a piece of paper, saying that if she had any questions, she could feel free to ask him. Kong Min caught the piece of paper and began to read its contents. The imaginary one decided to find himself a weapon. Although there were many new storylines in the open beta test, much remained the same as in the closed beta. North of Qingfen, there was one notable place where he could get a weapon suitable for his rank. But suddenly, like a bolt from the blue, a familiar voice rang out. It was the spirit of the cold moon flower, and she was eager to give him a new task. Smiling slyly, he wondered if there were any restrictions on the tasks given to players, and he gave her a trading task, which consisted of buying a sweet apple with a reward of 1 coin. The spirit of the cold moonflower pressed the accept button without hesitation. Only then did she carefully read the terms of her task. When she saw the reward price, she was indignant, because even the apple itself cost more. She left, hoping that there was some secret meaning to this task, and that such a reward would be a one-time thing. The spirit of the cold moon flower did not yet know that her suffering was only just beginning. Just half an hour later, the pretender was already eating that very sweet apple, and immediately after that, another personal task from him arrived. But when she saw the description, she was even more taken aback than last time. The point of the task was to learn to obey, and she had to take off her sock and stand like that for 1 minute, and the reward was still the same, 1 coin. But she decided to endure it and began to carry out the task. The Cold Moon Guildmaster stood in the middle of the street on one leg, holding one of her socks in her hand, and Mnimyi swore that it was all just for the sake of the experiment, and that he had no perverse intention. After completing this strange task, the spirit of the cold moonflower got dressed and stood humbly. Then she asked if there was anything else she could do to help the imaginary one. Sighing heavily, the pretender thought that this was exactly what he had feared. The next task for the spirit of the cold moonflower was to count the chicken, and the reward was still the same, 1 coin. The next task was to greet the guard, and the payment remained the same. Then he had to buy red paper and carefully fold 7,749 hearts to receive 1 coin. He also had to sing and dance for an audience of 5 or more people in an anime character costume. The guildmaster was already starting to go crazy from these not-so-normal tasks. Now Nimue was sure that he could completely control her. Previously, people wrote that they did not know about the closed beta testing, and the people who participated in it seemed to have vanished, as if they had never existed. But at the end of the game, the awakened ones and the gods would appear, and Minamoi was worried whether he would have enough strength to deal with them. The imaginary one's favor toward the spirit of the cold moonflower had increased by 8 points to 101, which meant that they were now friends. She sincerely hoped that she would now be able to receive normal assignments and rush to her boss. In the evening, outside the northern city, he could give her a task that she could not handle alone, so he told her to take someone with her. It was a very joyful and emotional event for her, and the spirit of the cold moonflower called on everyone who was level 5 or higher to join her. Before that location appeared, Minamoi had to level up his first level. Meanwhile, a huge number of players gathered near the southern gate. The imaginary one noticed that it was much less crowded during testing. One of the third-level players approached him and offered to help him level up for a modest fee. This game was unfriendly to beginners, and it was very difficult to level up. But Minamoi was not interested in such offers, and this person shouted after him that with the first level, he had no chance here. Everyone began to gossip that Minamoi would soon appear at the resurrection point, but then one of the 5th level players offered to help him. The others were puzzled as to why a 5th level player would grovel before a 1st level player. The guy explained that after scanning Minamoi, he saw that he was an NPC, but couldn't understand why he was considered a walking natural disaster. This information gave rise to even more rumors and discussions, but Minamoi refused the offered help and moved on. And now the imaginary one's favorability toward each of those present decreased by 10 points. This caused a storm of negative emotions and regret for their actions among all those present. But the imaginary one continued on his way to complete the task and raise his level. The other players decided to run after him in the hope that he would give them tasks. On Minamoi's path were saber-toothed rabbits with red eyes, which lived in groups and whose main skill was exploding bats. But he rushed past at such a speed that the rabbits did not even have time to react. The next obstacle was an assault demonic wolf. They attacked in packs, and their claws could cause bleeding in their target. At the sight of the battle with the pack of wolves, Nimmi drew his sword. He decided to use the soul-piercing skill, which could inflict 1 or more random effects. After all, a student of the secret arts could even use his emotions as a weapon, and Nimmi struck the first wolf with his sword. The damage immediately amounted to 850 points. It was impossible to believe, but he was able to defeat the wolf with 1 blow. But ahead of Minamoi lay a whole pack of such demonic wolves. The wolves bared their fangs and exposed their sharp teeth. Several dozen sharp wolf claws reached out toward Minamoi, but the whole wolf pack was in for an unpleasant surprise from him. Drawing his sword, he struck like lightning, dealing 850 points of damage to each wolf. For successfully completing this task, Minamoi received 60,000 experience points. Other players watched his epic battle live. Each of them wanted to either get the same costume as him or recruit him to their team. After his victory, Minimi was able to enter the depths of the Wolf Valleys. His level rose much faster than he expected, and it seemed that the place where they had agreed to meet his girlfriend was somewhere around here. But suddenly, something appeared ahead, and all the players were terrified. It was a huge storm demon wolf guard. It was much more ferocious and bloodthirsty than a normal wolf. If you encountered one on your way, you had to flee immediately, which is what everyone began to do. For such a cowardly act, Minamoi considered them all cowards. He himself rushed to attack the Storm Demon Wolf Guard. In this battle, Minamoi needed only 1 strike with his sword. The huge Wolf Guard was also defeated, and Minamoi stood at the top as the victor. Suddenly, he heard the voice of the Guildmaster Cold Moon behind him. The players from her guild had started a brawl with other players. Approaching Minamoi, she said that she had brought people on his behalf. He explained that they would have to wait there, and that a secret location would soon be revealed. He himself went on to complete his next task. After walking a little further, he saw the place he was looking for, A huge pack of demonic wolves sat on a high cliff. One of the wolves stood out from the rest of the pack. The pretender realized that this was the enemy he was looking for. It was the White King of Wolves, who controlled all the wolf packs in the vicinity of the city of Qingfeng and possessed great power and wisdom. He raised his muzzle to the sky and howled, signaling the other wolves to attack. The entire pack rushed down to the plain to attack Minamogo. Seeing such a huge number of wolves, the other players started shouting at Minamoy to leave, because they would tear him apart in a second. But Minamoy was confident in his abilities and flew into the air above the pack. He began to strike with lightning speed, not missing a single blow. All the wolves were defeated, and all that remained was to collect the coins. But suddenly, several more wolves from the pack attacked him from behind. But he was able to inflict significant damage on them without even raising his sword. This caused complete bewilderment among the gathered players. Now Nimyi challenged his main rival to a fight. The white wolf with burning eyes opened its mouth, revealing huge fangs. And like an arrow, it rushed down the mountain to attack Minamoy. But Minamoy was ready to fight such a strong opponent. And so began the most spectacular battle between two powerful opponents. The others watched with bated breath. Minamoy was able to deal a very serious blow to the King of Wolves. The damage was 2,145 points. It was simply amazing and caused complete delight in everyone. But that was not the end, and the white wolf was ready to attack again. Minamoy ran to attack him again, drawing his sharp sword. He was able to inflict another 2,145 points of damage on his opponent. This was immediately followed by another blow of equal force. Without wasting a second, Minamoy delivered the final blow for another 2,145 points. The Wolf King was now completely defeated by his enemy. The inhabitants of the Tianwu Empire were informed that the 10th level Lord Boss had been defeated in Qingfeng City, and the secret location of the Valley of the Underworld had been revealed. All the players immediately rushed to the forum in search of the necessary information. The Guildmaster of Cold Moon also read the message on the forum. She was very worried that now everyone would know that they were involved in this, even though their guild could now rise in the rankings. And they themselves could not miss this chance under any circumstances. Now she was receiving messages asking for help in getting to the secret location. She received messages not only from Jiang Yuyun, but also from 3 other guildmasters with the same question. So now they all decided to act according to the situation. And the spirit of the Cold Moon Flower needed to ask them something. She connected several guildmasters to a video call. Jiang Yuyun suggested they start quickly, because group calls were very expensive. The spirit of the Cold Moon Flower appreciated her joke, because apparently money was all they cared about. But the Guildmaster of El Dorado, Tian Yu, wasn't interested in money, and Huang Chao, the Guildmaster of Royal Harbor, wanted to start discussing the recent incident with the NPC as soon as possible. The spirit of the Cold Moon Flower snorted discontentedly under her breath. After completing the series of tasks from the NPC, he told her to wait and how long it would take for the secret location to open. The other guildmasters were skeptical of her words, but she assured them that she knew no more than they did, and if they didn't believe the notifications, they could go and destroy the boss. But no one present responded to her words. No one had any more questions, and the Guildmaster of Cold Moon said goodbye to everyone. The group video chat channel ended its session. All of this was a bit tedious for the Cold Moon Flower spirit. Suddenly, she received a personal call from Guildmaster Jiang Yuyun. She wanted to meet the NPC in person, and was willing to fulfill any conditions beforehand. For this, the Cold Moon Guildmaster asked to be called the Great Elder Sister and begged for it on her knees. But she did not agree to such conditions and ended the call. Then a message came from Ninamogo, asking her to bring someone without arousing suspicion, and quickly. The Guildmaster of Cold Moon led her people forward to unknown places. The 10th level dungeon of the Valley of the Underworld could be divided into 3 zones: the surroundings, the inner ring, and the cradle. Chen Mo made his way through the inner ring, leading his team to the cradle, while the rest of the guild members were ordered to hold the defense in the surrounding area. He dealt with the monsters he encountered along the way with a single swing of his sword. The girls on his team couldn't help but admire how easily he did it. The 8th level geocentric lizard was unable to withstand even a couple of Chen Mo's blows, but they were still extremely powerful monsters. As they moved forward, they didn't hear the lava begin to bubble. This was a sign that they had entered a very dangerous area. Now the group was moving along the inner ring of the Valley of the Underworld. They had to walk very carefully and not step into the lava lake, because with their current health levels, they couldn't survive even a second there. The spirit of the Cold Moon Flower wondered why they didn't just jump over these lakes and go straight ahead. as it would save a lot of time. The imaginary one knew the answer to this question and smiled slightly. He picked up a small stone from the ground next to him. He threw it straight into the small lava lake closest to him. Immediately, a pillar of fire rose up from the hot lava. The girls in the group were terrified by this sight. Such traps were not found in every lake, but it was better not to jump over them unnecessarily. Chenmo had studied all the location, walked all the routes, and of course knew the current one very well, and he was completely confident that he was going in the right direction. Suddenly, a small tree branch cracked under his foot. Now, a mighty fiery forest stood before their small team. In fact, Minami had died here more than once, and the safe path had to be found through trial and error. Lava moths sat on the branches, flapping their wings and creating a whirlwind that caused bleeding in anyone caught in it. The damage was equal to 50% of the current attack, and there was also a chance of being affected by confusion and panic. Suddenly, the spirit of the cold moonflower saw something that made her feel genuine fear. Several dozen lava moths rose into the air. Mimic quickly came to the aid of the small team. He crushed all the moths to dust with just a couple of swings of his sword. The girls in his group were very grateful to Emamoy for saving them. The guildmaster of Cold Moon thought that Minamoy was someone they could not afford to lose. The road then led them to the cradle of the underworld valley. This was the home of the leader of the Blood Wolves of Mount Meru, a level 15 lord. With a blow of his paws, he created a shockwave directed at the target and dealt 180 points of damage, and that was not all of his abilities. Minamoy asked the others to stand aside and leave this enemy to him, because they would only get in the way and not help. Taking the next step, Minami disturbed the sleep of the leader of the Blood Wolf. Chenmo waved at him and shouted that they hadn't seen each other in a long time. This behavior confused the leader somewhat, but a human step into the valley is a step towards certain death. But Minami had seen and heard it all before, and nothing had changed here. He drew his sword again and was immediately ready for battle. Minami struck the leader of the wolf pack with a very powerful blow with his ball. This blow inflicted 2,510 points of damage. It was not easy for us to deal with him, and the leader used his Earth Rumble skill. A huge pillar of fire shot up from the ground next to Mimyi, but Mimyi had already seen it all and knew that it would become smaller. As expected, the leader put up a lava barrier, activated his skill, and shrank in size. And now the leader was ready to rush into the attack, as always. The imaginary one was ready for all this, and, naturally, did not miss the blow. He shot up like a bullet high above his opponent. He delivered lightning-fast blows, causing 2,500 points of damage. The girls couldn't believe their eyes. They had never even dreamed of such technique, maneuvers, and the ability to predict an opponent's movements. And Minimyi continued to inflict serious damage on the leader of the wolf pack. His final blow was decisive, taking away the last 1,260 health points from his opponent. And this fierce opponent was finally completely defeated. For this victory, Minimoy received a simply amazing reward. By taking the 10th level weapon of the underworld, one could gain the opportunity to participate in trials. But this artifact was not considered very good, even in closed beta. And then Minimogo's gaze fell on something else among the rewards. He couldn't believe his good fortune at first. It was a mysterious artifact from the underworld. It strengthened one part of the body and increased the endurance and regeneration of the selected body part. Only players of the mythical profession could use it, and it seemed that with the start of open beta testing, new features had appeared for such players. And such a thing dropped from a weak level 15 boss. Minimoy couldn't even imagine that it could drop from bosses of level 100 and above. The girls ran to Minimoy to see if he had gotten anything useful as a reward. He didn't show them anything, and promised to tell them next time they met, telling them to return the same way before the monsters came back. He waved his hand, and in a second, he seemed to vanish into thin air. The Cold Moon Guildmaster was indignant because he had almost been theirs, and had slipped away again. They had to hurry because they were no match for such opponents. They managed to return unharmed to the vicinity of the wasteland. When they came out, one of the guild members ran up to them and told them that the heads of the 4 great guilds had already arrived. This information puzzled the spirit of the Cold Moon Flower, because they had arrived somewhat early. They had learned about the technique of teleportation and had spent fabulous sums of money on it, and each leader was accompanied by an elite squad. They had not been sitting idly by, and while the Cold Moon Guild was growing, they were ready for a fierce battle for the resources of the mysterious kingdom. But perhaps there was nothing to worry about, because the Cold Moon headquarters was located here. And besides, they now outnumbered and outpowered them. And since the game had only recently been launched, everyone was at roughly the same stage of development, and it was still too early to think about the balance of power. The guildmaster sent the others to explore the mysterious kingdom, while she herself went to meet with the other guild leaders. Meanwhile, the imposter arrived at the headquarters of the 6 Dark Dragons. Kong Min immediately realized that it was him, because no one else would enter so unceremoniously. She coquettishly asked him to at least knock next time. This time, the pretender had come on business and needed Kong Min's help. She asked what could be so urgent. He wanted to give her several assignments, and in return, he would accept genetic medicines, energy crystals, and magic scrolls. But Kong Ming replied that she had nothing to assign him at the moment. But he insisted, because the 6 Dark Dragons surely had a couple of cases lying around in the archives, and he was ready to take on any of them. He volunteered to personally help her search for such archival cases. Looking through the folders on the shelf, she replied that she needed to think about it. But Minamoy knew exactly what to do to get the assignment. He went to the cabinet and took out one of the archive folders. Holding it out to her, Kong Ming said he would not disturb her while she thought. He quietly moved away to the window and waited for her decision on the matter. To control the crowd of players, known as the 4 Disasters, he had to win their hearts, which craved artifacts and clues as to where to find them. All he had to do was post quests, and crowds of players would rush to complete them. In this way, he planned to establish control over all the players. Meanwhile, an important meeting was taking place at the Cold Moon Guild headquarters. The guild leaders spared no effort or resources to bring their people here to the city of Qingfeng. But the Cold Moon Guildmaster had a question. She really wanted to know what they were all up to. The great guilds jointly proclaimed that the Cold Moon Guild had been elevated to the 5th largest guild, and its leader had become the 5th most influential. She couldn't even believe that she had climbed so high, but she needed to understand the conditions under which this had happened. She had to provide all the information about the inimitable NPC and the mysterious kingdom. But the Guildmaster of Cold Moon claimed that she had already told everything she knew during the video conference. But their personal visit here made it clear that no one had believed her at the time. They emphasized that this was a truly unique opportunity for the Cold Moon Guild. Yuyan wondered if she had really decided to finally give in to her guild. Everyone eagerly awaited the response from the Cold Moon Flower Spirit. She gave them all her promise, but there was one small catch. They had to comply with 3 of her not very difficult conditions. The secret kingdom must enter the sphere of influence of Qingfeng City, and the others will have the right to explore it, but half of all resources will go to her guild. Also, at the end of the journey, everyone associated with the 4 great guilds would be required to leave Qingfeng. Thirdly, the announcement of the Cold Moon Guild's 5th place ranking in terms of influence must be posted on the forum for a week. After some thought, the chief agreed to her terms. In response to her demands, no other objections followed. The pretender waited for Kong Ming to come with a mission for him, but she had one important condition for giving him the task. The pretender had to join the 6 Dark Dragons. Thus, a new storyline was launched, the time to choose sides. Although he seemed particularly strong, he kept many secrets, and if he took their side, who knows what secrets would become available to them. The pretender readily agreed to this condition and chose the side of the Tianwu Empire. The current world map included 7 territories that maintained formal neutrality. However, according to the open beta storyline, they were constantly at odds with each other, both openly and secretly. After the fall of the Bloody Emperor, the 7 states lost their common enemy, and it became clear to everyone that this fragile peace would not last long. The folder contained all of the organization's unfinished or undisclosed cases, and the imaginary one could choose whatever he liked. Taking the folder in his hands, he began to slowly flip through its pages. He chose one of the 6 Dark Dragons' archive documents for himself. He took out the necessary materials and showed his choice to Kong Ming. Thus began a quest in search of ancient secrets, the goal of which was to investigate the legend of an ancient blood demon. Kong Ming's group set out for the Lindong Empire to help wipe out the remnants of the Blood Emperor's army, and Mimic was able to go with them. Thus began the next quest, Leave No Stone Unturned, whose goal was to destroy the followers and warriors of the Blood Emperor. The pretender had to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Kong Ming summoned one of her men named Chu Yu to her office. When he entered the office, she introduced him to his new colleague and instructed him to place him in headquarters. She told him that he would also be joining them on tomorrow's mission and should be considered a temporary member of the team. Chu Yu understood all her instruction and what was required of him now. He was the commander of the 3rd Special Unit of the 6 Dark Dragon and a guardian of morality. He understood understood that Chen Mo was an ordinary soldier, but close to the lords, and considering that he was an NPC, he would still be somewhat stronger. For now, Chen Mo could look around a bit, and the team had already been notified, and everyone expressed a desire to get to know him before tomorrow's operation. And Mimic went to look around the headquarters of the 6 Dark Dragons. His attention was drawn to one of the cabinets in the office. There were many interesting books on the shelves. This did not escape Chu Yu's attention, and he realized that Chen Mo was interested in ancient languages. The pretender asked permission to take a look at some of the books. A little later, he was able to take them and study them as much as he wanted, because at that time, not many people were interested in this. The pretender was very grateful for the opportunity. Their conversation was interrupted by soldiers, who entered the room and asked permission to report. Chu Yu allowed them to enter and listen to his men's report. 3 people entered the room where Nimyi and Chu Yu were talking. One of them stood out. He was a cyborg named Wang Li. The other 2 were brothers Zhang Da and Zhang martial arts master. This was the entire small 3rd Special Forces unit. Chu Yu asked them to take Chen Mo to his room in the dormitory and familiarize him with the safety procedures. Mimic said goodbye to the rest of the group. He and Wang Li slowly made their way toward the dormitory. Chu Yu explained that Chen Mo had been assigned from above, and that he didn't know who he was either, but that it was none of their business. They just had to do their job. Wang Li showed Chen Mo where his room was, and told him that the commander lived next door, and that if he had any questions, he should ask him. But when he saw the book in Chen Mo's hands, he chuckled and said that it seemed he had wasted his breath, because not everyone could borrow this book from the commander so easily. It seemed that Minimoy was very lucky with the people in this group. Sitting in his room, Chen Mo began to study the ancient language. This language was only available to players of the mystical profession, and increased the player's trust level. But in reality, this ancient language was demonic. Minimum needed to increase his level for tomorrow's mission, and the experience he had already accumulated should be just enough. He was able to increase his attack, defense, physical damage, and intelligence by 10 points, and now his current level was 9. Now, 10 points would be added to his fixed characteristics, not counting the 20 he received from the artifacts. The strength of a player of a mystical profession depended precisely on intelligence and spiritual energy, which, together with armor bonuses, amounted to almost 400 points. With such characteristics, Nimyi could defeat any player, and he proceeded to activate it. It gave him a new skill called Wasteland. While it was active, the player was enveloped in a thick fog, becoming invulnerable to physical damage. Nimyi was pleased that he had acquired a good skill on his first try. He wanted to try out the properties of this new skill right away. Enveloped in thick fog, he rose to the ceiling of the room. Then, like an invisible wind, he found himself on the roof of knowledge. He really wanted to try some new sensations, but it seemed that he would not be able to pass through objects. And Imaginative pulled back this magical fog, as if nothing had happened. Still, it would be nice if he could pass through physical objects as he leveled up. The northern border between the empires of Tianwu and Lindong ran along the Tianwu mountain range, and the temperature here was so low that it was winter all year round. The team's plan was to fly to the border with Lindong, climb down to the ground on a rope, and continue on foot. And since they were now a team, the others wanted to know more about Mnim. He said that he had served in the 9th Imperial Fleet as a defensive gunner on a ship, and had participated in the battle against the Bloody Emperor. The whole team was very surprised that he was not actually a civilian. Chen Mo said that during the battleship was destroyed, and he managed to eject, but he was hit and woke up in the Valkyrie Hospital. During the emergency landing, his memory was damaged, and he could only remember his rank, platoon, and the last moments before the battleship exploded. All the crew members exchanged sympathetic glances. They continued flying in complete silence, their heads bowed. In this silence, they paid tribute to a man with such great military achievements. Chen Mo did the same in response, knowing that questions were inevitable. Over 1,000 years, he had memorized the possible formations of the 7 empires, and they would not be able to identify each of the soldiers who had been killed. Chen Mo was an actor without an Oscar, and now Kong Ming should have no doubts about him. He was sure that every word he said would be reported the moment he finished speaking. They had reached their destination, and the commander ordered them to prepare for descent. One after another, they began to descend into the endless snow. Once they reached the ground, the first thing they did was check their communication. Now they had to move forward. Wang Li had to activate stealth mode. Chen Mo moved in the center, next to the captain, and the Zhang brothers brought up the rear. Each of them understood their assigned task precisely. They began to advance through the endless snow, according to their positions. But Mimic felt that something was wrong. This was not the meeting place at all. Moreover, Lindong's people were still nowhere to be seen, and as the host party, they They should have been waiting for them already. The commander ordered everyone to stay in their position, and Wang Li was to monitor the situation. After looking around, they decided to take cover behind large rocks. 2 hours had already passed since the agreed time, and this gave Chen Mo a bad feeling. But suddenly, he sensed movement and realized that someone was approaching them. An emergency mission called Hidden Assassination was launched, and the goal of the mission was to eliminate the enemy squad. Chen Mo informed the commander that he had reason to believe that these were not Lin Dong's men. The commander ordered Wang Li to scan these people and try to identify them, but as it turned out, identification was impossible. Now it was necessary to urgently decide what further action to take. The commander decided to go down to them with Chen Mo and test the waters, while the rest had to remain in place in full combat readiness. It was too risky, and Wang Li wanted to go with them. But he was the only long-range specialist in the squad, and they needed support from a distance. The unknown individuals pointed their guns at the commander and Chen Mo and asked them to identify themselves. Looking closely, Chen Mo noticed something suspicious. Their weapons were engraved with the symbol of the Blood Emperor. Unnoticed by the others, he winked at the commander, giving him a sign. The commander quietly raised his hands and seemed to want to identify himself. But at that very moment, he activated his Fever Flame skill. When activated, it gave a 20% boost to all of the user's stats. Next, he activated the Flaming Serpent Whip, which wrapped around the target and dealt 150% damage and could set the enemy on fire. Meanwhile, Nimmi instantly grabbed and activated his weapon of the underworld. This allowed them to eliminate a significant portion of the enemy, but there were those who managed to hide from them behind large boulders. Wang Li entered the fray and fired at them from a distance. The enemy launched a fierce counterattack from their hiding place. Their commander was indignant that Tianwu's squad had killed so many of his men. At that moment, Chen Mo, with the underworld weapon in his hands, rose from his hiding place. The situation was dire, as Wang Li was almost out of ammunition. One of the enemy's bullets was flying straight towards Chen Mo. He could even see the bullet in close proximity to himself, and in that same second, it hit him right in the head, passing right through. His entire squad was in shock and watched in horror as this happened. But Mimic managed to use his new skill, Wasteland, just in time. Seeing this, the enemy could not understand if he was even human. They fiercely fired at him with all the weapons they had. But Chen Mo didn't care, and the enemy couldn't understand what this devilish ability was. The commander of the Tianwu squad was also surprised by his ability, but everyone was very happy that their squad had gained such a treasure. Chen Mo, invisible to the enemy, began to strike. It was very difficult to deal with such a powerful opponent. They continued to fire at the demonic mist, but this could not save them from their inevitable demise at the hands of Ninimogo. Emerging from the mist, Chen Mo greeted one of the enemy squad members with a sneer. Nimogo understood that the immunity to physical damage provided by the wasteland was simply a mirage, but the enemy did not want to simply give up and die, so they decided to use the exhaustion skill available to them against Minimoy. But this exhaustion had no effect on Chen Mo. Holding a weapon from the underworld to the head of the enemy commander, Minimoy ordered them to surrender. Otherwise, they would face a quick and inevitable death. The enemy fell to their knees, and Chen Mo called the rest of the squad to him. As a result of the battle, he killed 3 people and received only 1,000 experience points for each of them. They were small fry and nothing more. The whole team thanked him for the amazing fight and asked him about his incredible ability. The commander nodded toward the captured enemy. One of the team members understood his silent command without words. He delivered a very powerful blow to the captive enemy's face. The enemy begged him to stop hitting him and promised to tell everything. They tried to find out how many more people from the enemy unit were in the area, but for some reason, the prisoner remained silent. They all decided that he was just thinking about how to deceive them, but the prisoner, frightened, told them that their base was located a kilometer away, under the snowy plain. The pretender began to ask about the people from Lindong, and it turned out that when they encountered their sentry, they were all killed. But if they had all been killed, it was unclear how the enemy had found out about the meeting place. Chen Mo hit him so hard that his teeth flew out, because the 7 empires had a rule that on the battlefield, you could only die without allowing information to leak. The Blood Emperor's captive claimed that even the dead had nothing to say, because it was the leader's ability to interrogate the dead. After hearing these words from the enemy, the commander of the Tianwu detachment fell into thought. Chen Mo knew that only 2 professions were capable of making the undead talk: sorcerers and shamans, and most likely, their chief novice shaman. After receiving all the information, the commander nodded approvingly to Minimoy. They no longer needed the prisoner, so Chen Mo sent him to the other world, receiving 2,000 experience points for doing so and completing the emergency task. Chen Mo received 50 points toward the 6 Dark Dragons organization's sympathy level and increased his reputation among the squad by 50 points. Minimoy suggested reporting the situation to headquarters and then waiting until evening and hiding and deciding in the dark how to destroy the enemy base. The entire squad unanimously supported his proposal. Together, they dug a decent shelter for themselves in the thickest snow. They sat quietly in it until it was completely dark outside. And then the time began to approach the interval they needed. One by one, they carefully climbed out of their shelter. Wang Li warned that he had few bullets left and that they would have to fight hand to hand from now on. But each of them wanted to have some fun and waited for their turn. The commander gave the order for the squad to move forward immediately. They began to move forward across the snow, illuminated by the bright moon. Wang Li sent his assistants into the air as small scouts. They pointed out to him that there were 9 enemy sentries ahead. The guys from the Tianwu squad were already itching to fight. Chen Mo received a new assignment to destroy the Blood Emperor's soldier. The mission class was changed to command, and 7 objectives had to be completed. The squad quietly approached the enemy base. Chen Mo suggested that the guys from the squad take a break and let him take out the guards, as he was better suited for the task. After all, he was trained for surprise attacks and infiltrations, and he could complete one of the mission objectives on his own, so the commander supported him. The others were a little upset because they also wanted to participate in the battle. Activating his wasteland skill, Chen Mo began infiltrating the enemy base. He spotted the first guard, a level 10 digger. He crept up behind him completely unnoticed by the enemy. The decision to attack from behind was the best one, and left the guard no chance of escape. Chen Mo then went in search of the other guards. He broke the second guard's neck very quietly and unnoticed. The third enemy guard suffered the same fate. Everything went very quietly, so Chen Mo chose the same method to send the fourth guard to the other world. Returning to the commander, Chen Mo reported that he had interrogated several people and found out that the entrance to the base was located under a snowy plain and was camouflaged. Access to the interior was granted by a password known only to the captain, which was constantly changing. Chen Mo picked up a small twig from the ground. He drew the location of the squads and said that there were 4 squads of 15 people each, and they had just eliminated one of them. The base consisted of 4 floors, and one of those Chen Mo interrogated said that there was another floor below, but he had never been there. Their entire group pondered his words about the layout of the base. Wang Li said that he might be able to find out the password to enter the base. All he needed was a little time, a diagram of the base, and access to their surveillance system. This was fitting for a representative of the cyborg family. The commander decided to attack head-on, not forgetting to collect valuables as a reward for his efforts. Chen Mo had a chance to achieve all his goals, since all the troops at the base were above level 15, and he would be able to easily raise his own level. And the entire Special Forces unit of the Tianwu Empire went on the offensive against the enemy. They approached the entrance to the base, which was disguised as a piece of snow. Here, it was all up to Wang Li and his cyborg abilities. In a matter of seconds, he was able to figure out the password to enter the base. They entered the correct combination of numbers on the door lock, and the entrance to the enemy base was magically open. A long staircase led down from the door into the darkness. Wang Li replaced the video from the surveillance camera with a static image, which should have bought them some time. Chen Mo immediately went alone to scout the base. The rest cautiously continued down the long staircase. The decoy entered the danger zone on the first floor of the enemy base. It seemed that the enemy had not noticed anything yet, but it was unlikely that this would last long. Chen Mo gestured to the others that there were enemy soldiers ahead. They used all the weapons and skills they had at their disposal. They didn't get very far, but so far, none of the guards had raised the alarm, which meant they still had a little time. But suddenly they heard 2 guards talking, and one of them was going outside for a shift change. They were riding the elevator up from the lower floors, talking about rumors that they had already been discovered. They had to be vigilant, because until the ritual was complete, they would have to sit and wait. But as soon as the elevator door opened, Chen Mo burned them with a strong flame. Those who were standing closest to the elevator doors were destroyed. The rest screamed that it was an ambush and wanted to escape. But this time, that was not to be. Everyone in that elevator received their share of powerful blows. Chen Mo also rushed into battle with his opponents at lightning speed. He began to deliver crushing blows to all members of the enemy group. He struck with his sword, sending them to the other world one by one. Some of his opponents still hoped to escape somehow, but the members of the Tianwu Special Forces did not allow them to do so. Chen Mo was able to defeat all of these enemies single-handedly. Grabbing his hand, the squad commander asked if he was okay. But everything was just fine, and Chen Mo was hardly even hurt. Even though that was the case, for some reason, the commander really wanted to punch him in the face. Suddenly, Wang Li's gaze caught on something, and it wasn't good. There was a camera in the elevator, and now their squad had definitely been discovered, and Chen Mo's face was right in front of the surveillance camera's lens. Wang Li had miscalculated a little, and the base used two separate surveillance circuits, external and internal. They needed to be ready to launch a rapid assault. It was only a matter of time. First, they had to clear this level and look for anything that would help them in their defense. Wang Li found a second-generation Shelly assault rifle, which was part of the basic equipment of the Lindong Empire soldiers. The Seven Empires created the appearance that they were throwing all their forces into destroying the Blood Emperor, but in reality, they were supplying them with weapons. Shelley's assault rifle was of the ordinary class, and only level 8, and was a fairly weak weapon. It was no match for Chen Mo's weapon, but it could be sold to some player for a little extra cash. All this time, the imposter was being watched through the camera's peephole. The deputy head of the base was informed that the people of the Tianwu Empire were already there. He was aware of this, but continued to calmly go about his business. Oren ordered to block the exits, activate the internal defense system, deploy combat units, and proceed with the third plan. He didn't like that he still had to teach his subordinates how to act in such a situation. He considered them a bunch of idiots, but it wasn't his place to complain, since the samples had come to the operating table themselves. After all, their boss had almost finished all his work there. To Wang Li, the situation seemed a little strange. For some reason, the elevator was still working, even though they had been discovered. It was good that there were people who had something else on their minds besides fights and battles. Wang Li checked the exit from the base. The passwords no longer worked. The enemy must have left the elevator working so that they could go downstairs, where they were already waiting for them. Now they had two options: either go down and attack, or wait for them to come up. Chen Mo was in favor of going down and fighting the enemy. According to Wang Li's calculation, at least 10 assault rifles would be aimed at them as soon as they got out of the elevator, and they would be riddled with bullets. But Chen Mo had a well-thought-out plan for this situation. The entire Special Forces team was once again in complete shock. He could hit any target he chose with his underworld weapon. The other members of the team didn't understand what had come over him, but he often had to deal with similar situations in battle with the Bloody Emperor. Annihilator cannons and other space artillery fired shells over his head. That was real firepower. The rest of the group unanimously showed their appreciation for his remarkable skills. Now they could all boldly go into battle with the enemy. They descended in the elevator, hiding behind a barricade of fallen enemies. Armed men from the Blood Emperor's group were already waiting for them downstairs. But Chen Mo was the first to step out of the elevator door and immediately opened fire. His bullets hit the bodies of his enemies without fail. He was able to inflict 2,250 points of damage on key positions. He was able to destroy a 10th level mocker and earn 1,000 game experience points for it. The rest of the team also fired fiercely at their opponents. The entire enemy group on this lower floor was destroyed. But suddenly, Chen Mo felt a bullet hit his left arm. However, thanks to his armor bonuses, the damage taken was reduced by 1 point. The damaged part of his body would be paralyzed for 10 seconds, and although the damage was insignificant, sometimes the debuffs still took effect. However, his paralysis should also pass very soon. Wang Li also took a bit of a beating from their enemy's onslaught. A bullet also hit his arm, and now he couldn't use it for a while. The commander suggested that when they returned from the mission, they should ask their superiors to replace it, because it was convenient to be a cyborg. They emerged from this battle as the undisputed victor. Now they could relax a little and joke around. But suddenly, Chen Mo silently sent one of them to one of the nearby doors. He tried to figure out what might be behind it. It turned out that behind it was a large ammunition depot.